Hey, deep divers, welcome back to the show. Today, we're strapping in for a wild ride on board Trump Force One, getting a glimpse into the campaign strategy and image making of the one and only Donald Trump. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. And let us know your thoughts.
Sounds fascinating. What kind of insights are we diving into today?
Okay, so let's unpack this. First off, the food situation on Trump Force One is pretty telling. Chick-fil-A for everyone. No alcohol in sight. Remember that McDonald's pit stop Trump made on the campaign trail? This feels like a deliberate contrast, almost like a strategic branding play.
You've got a point there. Fast food has become a bit of a political prop, hasn't it? It's an attempt to project an image of being in touch with the average American. But in this case, the Chick-fil-A on Trump Force One adds a layer of exclusivity. It's like saying, I'm one of you, but I'm also a cut above.
Right. It's fascinating how these seemingly small details can actually reveal a lot about a candidate's image and the message they're trying to convey. And speaking of image, you don't believe this, guy. There's a Trumpinator bobblehead on board. Picture this. Arnold Schwarzenegger, but Trumpified, with a mini machine gun in the cockpit. I mean, come on. Is that not the most Trump thing ever?
It's definitely over the top, isn't it? But that's part of Trump's appeal to his supporters. He embraces this larger-than-life persona. And the bobblehead is just a physical manifestation of that. It plays into this idea of strength, power, and even a bit of Hollywood swagger.
Totally. And get this, the soundtrack on Trump Force One is apparently Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody. Does that scream Donald Trump to you?
Music choice in campaigns is always interesting. It's about tapping into emotions and creating a specific vibe. Bohemian Rhapsody is a classic rock anthem, sure, but it's an unusual choice for Trump. It makes you wonder what kind of message he's trying to send with that.
Right. It's definitely not what I would have expected. Now, let's talk about Trump's comments about his stamina. He was bragging to the Nelk boys about his nonstop schedule, no breaks, and even threw in a jab at Kamala Harris for taking time off.
That's a classic example of the rhetoric around work ethic in politics. There's this expectation, particularly for male candidates, that they have to be tireless machines, always on, always working. It plays into this idea of masculinity and strength, and it often creates a double standard for female candidates.
Absolutely. It's like a woman taking time off is seen as a weakness, while a man doing the same is praised for his dedication. And then, to top it all off, Nelk boys hand Trump a book titled Kamala's Greatest Achievements, all blank pages.
That's where campaign humor comes in.
Right.
It's an attempt to use satire and even mockery to dismiss an opponent's accomplishments without actually engaging in a substantive policy debate. The question is, does this kind of humor resonate with voters, or does it come across as petty and mean-spirited?
You know, it's interesting because right after that, Trump starts talking about Biden's beach trips. He's painting this picture of Biden as a frail old man in a child-sized beach chair, contrasting that with his own relentless schedule, and strongman figures like Xi Jinping.
What's fascinating here is how Trump is trying to create a contrast between his leadership style and Biden's. He's emphasizing action, dominance, and a 247 commitment to the job.
It's like he's saying, I'm the only one who can handle this. I'm the strong leader America needs.
Exactly. And by invoking figures like Xi Jinping, he's also tapping into anxieties about America's place in the world. He's implying that the country needs a strong leader to stand up to these other global powers.
And to really drive home the point, he ends by saying, if Kamala Harris wins, this country is finished. It's totally finished. Talk about high stakes.
That kind of rhetoric is definitely something to pay attention to. It raises the stakes of the election to an almost existential level.
It's like he's saying, it's me or the apocalypse.
Exactly. And that's a very powerful message, but also potentially divisive. It really does make you think about how every detail is being used to craft a specific narrative. It's like a carefully staged performance designed to appeal to a particular audience.
And speaking of staging, let's go back to the fast food for a second. We talked about the Chick-fil-A on Trump Force One, but remember that McDonald's stop on the campaign trail. What's the strategy behind using fast food like this? It seems almost too calculated, doesn't it?
It definitely is calculated. Fast food has this interesting duality in American culture. On one hand, it's associated with everyday people affordability and a certain sense of Americana. But on the other hand, it's also linked to issues like obesity, unhealthy eating habits, and corporate greed.
So by associating himself with fast food, is Trump trying to tap into that sense of working-class authenticity?
Exactly. It's an attempt to project an image of being relatable, man of the people. But then the Chick-fil-A on Trump Force One adds a layer of exclusivity, almost a sense of aspirational appeal.
It's like saying, I'm just like you, but I'm also successful and can afford the good stuff.
Precisely. And it plays into that carefully constructed image of the self-made businessman, the outsider, who's not afraid to break the mold.
It's all about crafting a specific persona, isn't it? It makes me think about that Trumpinator bobblehead again. It's funny, but there's a deeper message there too, right?
Absolutely. The bobblehead isn't just a joke. It's a symbol of how Trump wants to be seen. Strong, powerful, even a bit intimidating. It plays into the whole strongman image that's become so central to his persona.
And how does that strongman image tie into his comments about stamina and his constant attacks on Biden's age and energy levels?
It's all part of the same narrative. He's trying to project an image of himself as the vigorous, decisive leader in contrast to Biden, who he portrays as weak and fading. It's about tapping into this deep-seated anxiety among some voters about having a leader who's seen as physically and mentally up to the job.
So it's not just about policy differences. It's about creating this image of strength and competence.
Yeah.
Even if it means resorting to personal attacks and exaggerated claims.
Exactly. It's about creating a narrative that resonates with voters on an emotional level, even if the facts don't necessarily support it. And that's where things can get really dangerous.
Because it's about manipulating emotions rather than engaging in a genuine debate about the issues.
Precisely. And when you combine that with the kind of apocalyptic rhetoric we heard earlier, this country is finished, it creates a sense of urgency and fear that can be very powerful in motivating voters.
It's almost like saying, if you don't vote for me, everything will fall apart. That's a pretty heavy message to put out there.
It is. And it's something we need to be aware of as we navigate this increasingly polarized political landscape.
We're seeing how these carefully crafted images and narratives can have a real impact on how people perceive the candidates and the stakes of the election.
It's a fascinating and concerning glimpse into the world of modern political campaigning, where image often trumps substance and fear can be a powerful motivator. It really makes you question how much of what we see from politicians is genuine versus a carefully constructed performance.
It's like we're peeling back the layers of a very elaborate PR campaign, isn't it? And it all circles back to this central question. How much does a candidate's personal style actually matter versus their actual policies?
That's the million-dollar question for voters, isn't it? Are we swayed by the carefully curated image, the sound bites, the emotional appeals? Or do we dig deeper and examine the policies, the track records, the actual substance behind the persona?
Because easy to get caught up in the spectacle of it all. The Trumpinator, bobbleheads, the fast food photo ops, the Queen soundtrack.
Yeah.
It's all very entertaining. But does it tell us anything meaningful about how a candidate will actually govern?
That's where critical thinking comes in. We have to be able to separate the performance from the reality, the image from the substance. It's about recognizing that these tactics are often designed to distract us from the real issues at stake.
So how do we as voters avoid falling into that trap? How do we cut through the noise and make informed decisions?
It starts with being aware of these tactics, recognizing them for what they are. Attempts to manipulate our emotions and sway our opinions. We need to be critical consumers of information, questioning what we see and hear, and seeking out diverse perspectives.
And not just accepting things at face value, right?
Yeah.
Just because a candidate presents themselves a certain way doesn't mean that's who they really are or what they actually stand for.
Exactly. It's about looking beyond the surface, examining the policies, the voting records, the actions that speak louder than words. And it's about engaging in thoughtful conversations like the one we're having right now, where we can dissect these tactics and understand their potential impact.
Well, deep divers, we've reached the end of our flight on Trump Force One. We've seen the Chick-fil-A, met the Trumpinator, heard the Queen soundtrack.
Right.
But more importantly, we've unpacked the messaging, the symbolism, and the carefully constructed image that Donald Trump is projecting.
We've seen how he uses humor, fast food, and even attacks on his opponents to create a powerful narrative that resonates with a certain segment of voters.
And we've explored the deeper implications of his rhetoric, from the subtle gender dynamics to the anxieties about America's global standing.
Ultimately, it's up to each of us to decide how much weight we give to a candidate's personal style versus their actual policies.
Food for thought as we head into this crucial election season, wouldn't you say? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'll see you on our next Deep Dive.